Hello, and welcome back to a galaxy far, far away, and the Board Game Guys Star Wars Rebellion Tutorial, Episode 2. I'm going to assume that you have watched Episode 1, the component overview, so if you haven't, you may want to go watch that and then come back. The Learn to Play book that comes with the game is very helpful, especially to set up and play your first game, but it's still easy to miss some of the rules. Until my 12th game or so, I was still playing something a little bit incorrectly, so you can learn from my experience and get everything right from the beginning and have a great first experience with the game. I'm also going to assume that for your first play at least, you are just using the base game and not the expansion content. The expansion does improve the combat system immensely, but you will make your life simpler and easier by sticking to the base game just to begin with. There is a very thorough setup guide for your first game, starting on page 4 of the Learn to Play book. There's also a diagram of the starting board state on page 16. So we're going to follow those, shall we? Each player picks a side and takes all the required components for their faction: leaders, ships, loyalty tokens, card decks, reference boards, etc. Communal components like dice, damage tokens, and so on are set aside in a supply for now. Each player takes their starting leaders, remember those are the ones that don't have the recruitment badge on them, and puts them in the leader pool area of their reference board, setting the rest of their leaders aside for now. Unfold the two boards and line them up in the middle of the playing area. The Imperial player sits so that the system names are facing them. The Rebel player sits on the opposite side of the board. Place the time token on space number 1 of the time track and place the Rebel reputation token on space 14. The Rebel player prepares their objective deck by separating the cards based on the numbers on their backs, 1, 2, and 3. If just using the base game, shuffle each section by itself, put the number 3s on the space marked objectives on the board, then put the number 2s on top of those and the number 1s on top of those. If you are using the expansion content, this step requires some random selection of objective cards so that different ones are left out each time you play. I'll explain that process at the end of this video. Each player prepares their action deck by removing the cards that don't have the recruitment badge on them. In future games, those are your starting cards, but for your first play, they don't get used, so just put them back in the box. Shuffle the space tactics cards and place them near the board for easy access for both players. Do the same with the ground tactics cards. If you're using the expansion tactics cards, each player will have taken their own unique set of ground and space tactics cards when gathering all their faction-specific components. Each player now prepares their mission deck. The Rebel player removes the 4 starting missions, those are the ones with the yellow arrow on them, and then shuffles the rest and places them next to the spot on the reference board that says Mission Deck. The Imperial player will also remove their starting 4 missions, but before shuffling the rest of their deck, they will remove the project cards. Those are the ones that have the Starburst logo in the bottom corner. They'll shuffle those, place them on the space on the board labeled projects, and then they will shuffle their rest of their mission cards. Now each player puts their loyalty markers into play according to the diagram on page 16. The Rebel player puts loyalty markers on Kashyyyk, Bathawui, and Naboo. The Imperial player will put Imperial loyalty on Saleucami, Corellia, and Mustafar, while placing subjugation markers on Sullust and Mandalore. For future games, the advanced setup rules on page 18 of the Learn to Play book will tell you how to make the starting planets for each player a little more random. Once the loyalty and subjugation markers are in place, players then place their starting units on the board, again according to the diagram on page 16. Page 18 will have rules for customizing placement of your units for future games. The Rebel player puts 1 Corellian Corvette, 1 Rebel transport, 1 X-Wing, 1 Y-Wing, 3 Rebel troopers, and 1 airspeeder on Botha Wooey. They will also place 1 X-Wing, 1 Y-Wing, 1 airspeeder, and 3 troops on the space marked Rebel base. While the Rebel player is placing their units, the Imperial player will place a much larger starting force as follows. Sulakami gets 1 Star Destroyer, 2 TIE Fighters, 2 Stormtroopers, and 1 AT-ST Scout Walker. Mandalore gets 1 Death Star, 4 TIEs, 2 Stormtroopers, and 1 AT-ST. Coruscant starts with 1 Star Destroyer, 1 Assault Carrier, 2 TIEs, 3 Stormtroopers, 1 AT-AT, and 1 Scout Walker. Corellia has 1 Assault Carrier and 1 Stormtrooper. Sullust has 1 Star Destroyer, 2 TIEs, 2 Stormtroopers, and an AT-ST Scout Walker. Lastly, Mustafar begins with 1 Assault Carrier, 2 TIEs, 2 Troopers, and 1 AT-ST. Now, remove the Empire's starting planets from the probe deck. Put them back in the box. The Rebel player now takes the remaining probe deck and uses it to choose the location of the Rebel base. It can be either a populous or remote planet, and the Rebel player can pick any of the cards that are left in the deck, but it is highly advised that you do not pick a territory that is next to anything with Imperial units in it. The Rebel player removes that system card from the deck, puts the rest of the deck on the probe deck space, and puts their card face down under the spot marked location next to the Rebel base. Each player now draws 2 cards from their respective mission decks, giving them their starting hand of 6 cards, and setup is complete. If you are playing with just the base game, you are now ready to move on to episode 3 of my tutorial. However, if you decide to use the expansion content, I will now go over the things that are different about setup if you're playing with Rise of the Empire. Firstly, there are a few component changes. Certain mission cards and action cards are completely replaced by their expansion equivalents. The rule sheet for the expansion lists those cards. The expansion versions are compatible with the expansion rule changes. That's why they've made them. Take out the originals, substitute the new ones. The old tactics cards are completely replaced by new sets for each faction. So get rid of those little ones, and each player should have their own unique set of space and ground tactics cards. Find the Death Star Plans card in the set of cards marked 3 on the back. Take that and 4 randomly selected cards for objective set 3. Take that, as well as 4 randomly selected objective 3 cards, give them a shuffle, place them on the objective pile, and get rid of the remaining ones. Now do the same thing for the 2 cards. Find the Death Star Plans labeled 2, select 4 more cards, get rid of the rest, give them a shuffle, place them on top, and then lastly, take the 1s. There are no Death Star Plans in the set of 1s. Give them a shuffle and select 5 random ones, removing the rest and placing them on top of the objective pile. You now have your objective deck set up. The expansion content can be played using the classic New Hope starting situation that was described in this video and on page 16 of the rulebook. Or you can use the new Rogue One setup that is in the expansion rules. To do that, the Imperial player places a Death Star on space 3 of their build queue and puts a Death Star under construction it's that bad boy, on their choice of any one remote planet. They're also going to add 1 Stormtrooper and 4 TIE Fighters to that system. They're going to remove that system card from the probe deck. They are then given 8 TIE Fighters, 3 Assault Carriers, 3 Star Destroyers, 2 TIE Strikers, 12 Stormtroopers, 4 AT-STs, 2 Assault Tanks, and 1 AT-AT to place on any Imperial, Loyal, or Subjugated systems. At least 1 ground unit must be placed on each of the Imperial systems, Loyal or Subjugated, at the start of the game. The Rebel player then gets 1 X-Wing, 1 Y-Wing, 1 U-Wing, 1 Rebel Transport, 1 Corvette, 5 Rebel Troopers, 2 Airspeeders, and 1 Rebel Vanguard. These units can be divided between the Rebel base space and any one Rebel or neutral system on the board. To determine which systems belong to which player at the start of the game, you can either use the loyalty placements of the base game setup, that's on page 16 of the Learn to Play, or the advanced setup option of revealing probe cards from the probe deck until you've got 3 Rebel systems showing and 5 Imperial systems. Each of the 3 Rebel systems gets Rebel loyalty, whereas the first 2 Imperial systems get subjugated, and the remaining ones, plus of course Coruscant, have Imperial loyalty. Remember to set the 5 starting Imperial system cards aside and don't put them back in the probe deck. When playing with the expansion, each player will decide for themselves which set of mission cards they want to use, either the original base or the expansion ones. Regardless of which set you choose, you will always use the cards that have the leader icons on them. The classic set also uses all the cards that have no icon on them, while the expansion set uses the leaders plus the cards with the Darth Vader icon on them. Regardless of which set of mission cards the Imperial player chooses to use, they will always use all of the project cards to play with. You are now ready for episode 3 of my tutorial. May the Force be with you.